We're officially in the dead part of the year, unfortunately. The NBA season, it just finished up, as we all know. The NFL season is still some time away. But I have a question for you. Do you remember during the 1996 draft, the Charlotte Hornets traded away a young 18-year-old prospect shooting guard, I think his name was Kobe Bryant, to the Los Angeles Lakers? I'd say that trade worked out for both sides, right? I mean, the Lakers, they won multiple titles. Kobe retired as one of the GOATs. Well, the Hornets, they haven't escaped mediocrity. Now, of course, as we look back, it's one of the worst trades ever, right? But we didn't know that at the time, right? We didn't know it was that bad at the time. And that's the situation I want to look at today. You know, I'm going to be going through my mock draft 2.0 on the channel, but I wanted to throw a twist on it, right? As you can imagine, there will be some trades on today's mock, and they might be a little crazy, you know, they might not. So stay tuned for that. Let me know down in the comments what you think about the trades I've thrown together. But this is your early reminder to support us. We're on the road to 500 subs on the channel, a super big milestone that I hope to hit one day, and we can't get there without y'all. So if you enjoy what you're listening to at any point, support us down below, drop a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. But without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. Let's get into it. And with the number one pick, there's no surprise here. The San Antonio Spurs, they get Victor Wembanyama right after the draft lottery. We knew who was going to the San Antonio Spurs, and they lucked out with the number one pick. But they're getting a guy who's 7'5" with an 8-foot wingspan. Victor Wembanyama, right now, he has all the tools to be a generational player on both sides of the ball. He's going to an organization with one of the best developmental staffs in the entire NBA. The only thing that you have to worry about right now with Vic is just his frame, right? Is his body going to be able to withstand the physicality of the NBA on a nightly basis? That's really the only thing I have to worry about Vic right now, right? But I do have another question for you guys, right? I did in the intro, but I have one right now, and this question's coming just because I want to play some devil's advocate. But the one thing I want to ask you guys is the debate my co-host and I have had on this podcast before. Is Vic, in your guys' mind, going to be the clear-cut number one pick because he's the best player in the class? Or is it because that he's that big of a unicorn prospect? Right, let me explain, because the top of this class reminds me a lot of the 2019 class with Ja Morant and Zion Williamson, where Ja may have been ranked as the better player in the pre-draft process, and to be fair, he's had a better start to his career than Zion Williamson, but Zion was that unicorn of a prospect that you had to take him with the number one overall pick, whether if he was the best player or not, right, to be honest. That's why now I believe that having the number one pick in a class that has a generational prospect is a blessing and a curse, because you have a shot at a franchise changer, but most times it ends up as a curse more so than a blessing. But let me know what you guys think down below. Is Vic going to live up to this hype? Is he going to be that next generational star? Or are we simply overlooking guys like Scoot Henderson, who has a pretty good chance of being the best player in the class as well? But we're going to take a quick look at his fit here. As you see here, you have a guy, he's going to slide right into the starting lineup, whether if he's going to be the center or the power forward, which sounds crazy that he's 7'5" and might be a power forward. But Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and Vic could be the starting five for the Spurs next year. It's an interesting look, right? As it's definitely not title contending, but it's a step in the right direction for a team that needs it in San Antonio. Moving over to number 2, I have them choosing fit over talent, and that is more so Brandon Miller than Scoot Henderson. We're talking about a guy who's a 6'9" sharpshooter with elite two-way ability from day one, right? He reminds me of like a Rudy Gay, a prime Rudy Gay, or even like a Paul George, right? This is a guy that would go number one in most draft classes. If a class like this didn't have Victor Wembanyama, we would be having the heated debate between Scoot or Brandon Miller, right? Now, Brandon Miller can create his own shot at times, but I believe going to a team like Charlotte, he would fit perfectly next to a guy like LaMelo Ball. If I have to remind you, a guy like LaMelo is an elite playmaker who would he basically puts his guys in the right spots most of the time. He's going to do that for Brandon Miller, right? Now, this team does have some questions to answer as to who is going to be put around these two guys, right? I know we have talented bigs on this team like Nick Richards and Mark Williams, but what are we going to do with Terry Rozier? What are we going to do with Kelly Oubre to put around the stars, the young stars of this team? But just to take a quick look, let's say they bring back Terry. Let's say they bring back Kelly Oubre. this could be a potential lineup for them next year where they have LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, Brandon Miller, Kelly Oubre, and Nick Richards. Definitely an interesting fit here, right? This is a fringe play-in team in my mind. They're going to need a year or two to mesh, right? But Brandon Miller to the Hornets, I'm buying into the hype. Moving over to number 3, we have a trade. We have the first trade of the episode, and Portland makes a splash, right? There's been rumors that Dame and Portland, they have no interest in splitting up. They want to win now, right? And they want to continue building around Dame. They're going to make a trade here with the Toronto Raptors. The Blazers are going to receive OG Anunoby, Chris Boucher, and the number 13 pick in the draft. The Raptors, due to cap reasons, are going to get Anthony Simons, Keon Johnson, and the number 3 pick in the draft. I understand you're looking at this like, man, the Blazers got fleeced. But they got OG Anunoby, right, in the number 13 pick. And the only reason Anthony had to be in the trade is because the Raptors aren't going to take Jusuf Nurkic, right, with his contract. And Anthony, he's the next best player that makes a decent amount of money, right, the right amount of money to match OG Anunoby. So for cap reasons, Anthony has to be in this deal for the Blazers. But, I mean, look, OG Anunoby, let's not slight him. He's an all-NBA defender with a great three-point shot. He's going to get tons of open looks playing with a guy of the caliber of Damian Lillard. He's a guy that teams were trying to trade 3 to 4 first-round picks for at this past trade deadline, right? Most notably the Memphis Grizzlies. But Chris Boucher is another guy that he's going to come in. Sure, he's a salary filler, but he's still going to provide great minutes. He can maybe play the starting 5 on this team. Maybe Nurkic can run the bench, be a little bit more aggressive on the offensive side of the ball. But Chris Boucher is going to come in and be that center for this team going forward. And plus, they did move down 10 spots, but you get an all-NBA type player, and you're still going to get some young talent to bring in as well. Possibly a lineup of Dame, OG Anunoby. You can throw Shaedon Sharpe in there. He's going to spread his wings a little bit more. You can bring Jeremy Grant back in free agency. And like I said, Jusuf Nurkic or Chris Boucher. But regardless, Dame and the Blazers get aggressive. Moving over to, Toronto. Excuse me. Let's dive into their part of the trade, right? They shot their shot, right? And they scored. But Scoot Henderson, he maybe has the only argument in this class for being better than Victor Wembanyama. You know, it's a guy that he can carry an offense and a defense. He can play make, he can score on the offensive side of the ball. Though we want to see his shot improve, he's very well rounded on the offensive side of the ball, as well as on the defensive side. I think he can defend, 1 through 3. He has the size, quite literally looks like a bodybuilder, and he has the explosive ability to do quite literally anything on a basketball court. He's no doubt a special talent, both sides of the ball. He's joining a team in Toronto that has tons of length, tons of defensive versatility. Scoot just needs to come in, he needs to be himself, and he needs to be the superstar that we know he can be. I think in 2 or 3 years, Toronto can be a scary team going forward. They shot their shot and they scored on a potential franchise changer. And you look at a potential lineup. I mean, you have a guy like Scoot Henderson at the 1. They would pick up Anthony Simons in a trade. Then you have Scotty Barnes, Pascal, and Jakob Poeltl, right, with some depth pieces as well. This team is in a very good position to be very dominant in 2 to 3 years, like I said, and Scoot Henderson can change everything for Toronto and their landscape going forward. At number 4, I've dug a little bit more into the Thompson twins, and I understand more so of the hype than I did when we did our first mock draft, but especially for Amen Thompson. And I'm going to have him going here to the Houston Rockets. And I believe once he comes into the NBA, from day one, he's going to be one of the best athletes in the entire NBA, right? But I believe what makes him very interesting, and I believe what makes him an intriguing player to pick is his ability to play make, right? He already projects to be a great playmaker and lead guard in a couple years. But if he can continue to develop his overall game and really be that elite lead guard, his measurables are already there, right? So that combination alone could be scary. But he is single-handedly, the talent that he is making the Rockets relook into bringing James Harden in this offseason, as even with his defensive upside, I think Amen Thomas would be a perfect fit in this Rockets offense that sometimes lacks that defensive ambition, right? So Amen Thompson can come in, maybe be a franchise culture changer, and get this Rockets team to really take that next step. But let's say the Rockets do bring in James Harden. Let's say the rumors are true. A potential fit could be this. You can have James Harden at the 1, Amen Thompson at the 2. You can either have Tari Eason through free agency or Jayshawn Tate at the 3. You can have Jabari Smith and Sengun. That's a good starting 5. I think that's a play-in level starting 5. Not to mention, you would then have Jalen Green off the bench, which I believe Jalen Green would instantly go and be an elite 6-man in this league, right? I think he might be the best in the NBA, especially when it comes to the scoring department. But moving over to number 5, we have one of my favorite players in the draft, and the Pistons. They run into some nostalgia with this pick. They're going to get Jarace Walker out of Houston, a guy who is a strong defender as a forward. He can immediately come in and help the Pistons build something good on the defensive side of the ball, especially with guys like Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren. They're helping him out as well. He's a physical presence on the glass, something that the Pistons have missed the last couple years. Ever since really Drummond left, this team has struggled rebounding the ball. Jarace Walker can do that here for the Detroit Pistons. And I'm going to be honest, this is more so of a fit pick than a potential pick, as he doesn't scream future superstar like some of the guys that we've already mentioned. But Jarace Walker's a nice player to have on your roster when you want to contend. And to be completely fair, I think he could take some great strides offensively under a guy like Monty Williams, and he could turn into a fringe all-star, like an Aaron Gordon level type of player. I think it just, how much is Monty going to affect a guy like his game? I'm very excited to see it. But a potential lineup here, if we want to look into it, you can have a Cade Cunningham coming back from injury, a Jaden Ivey looking to take another step, Bojan Bogdanovic, Jarace Walker, and Jalen Duren to close out the front court. This is a great starting lineup. I think this is no doubt a play-in roster with Monty Williams now at the helm. You have some promising pieces on the bench as well. Detroit might be back with a pick like Jarace Walker, as they didn't get Vic, right? But they could still get a very valuable piece. Well, number 6, right? Moving over to number 6, I have the other Thompson twin, Ausar Thompson, a guy who is going to be a lockdown defender from day one with some elite two-way ability. Let's not forget, I really believe a guy like Ausar can defend 1 through 4. Right, I believe he slides right into a starting lineup for the Orlando Magic, and to me, he no doubt makes this team very scary. He's going to provide defensive versatility from day one, as well as some downhill scoring, some playmaking ability. He has to work a little bit on his outside shot, right? But, Ausar, his confidence is through the roof. In an interview that he recently did, he said he's the second best player in the class. Who's number 1 to him? That's his brother, Amen Thompson. So these Thompson twins are coming in with plenty of confidence. They're super confident, right? And super competitive is the word I was looking for. But how quickly can Ausar get his offensive game to the next level? How quickly can he develop that outside shot to take his game to that next level? I do worry about the fit in a way, because it's going to hinder the development of all the young talent that's on this team, because there is only one ball. How can everybody else develop? How can everyone else be effective without the ball? That's going to be the big question for this Orlando team. But regardless, I think Ausar Thompson has plenty of untapped potential, and the Magic get a huge addition. You look at their lineup, you can have Jalen Suggs, Ausar Thompson in the backcourt, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, and Wendell Carter. This team, I've said it a couple times, but some of these rookies can really take these teams to the play-in level. And though the Magic didn't make the splash of a trade that they wanted to, they still get a very talented player. Moving over to number 7, I have the Indiana Pacers getting that wing that they've desperately needed in Cam Whitmore. They get a guy who plays above the rim, one of the most athletic prospects in this class. He's no Amen Thompson, but he's right up there, right? This is a guy who could be a great 3-and-D wing type of player for years and years in this league. And it's also a guy that shot in the 86th percentile as a spot-up shooter, as a freshman at Villanova, right? A defensive-minded school. I believe his game can translate nicely to the NBA level. I would like to see a little bit more offensively, especially in the playmaking department, maybe a little bit more scoring development in his game. But he's shown flashes at Villanova, so how much are you going to buy into those flashes, right, is a question we have to ask. But good thing for Cam Whitmore, at least on the offensive side of the ball, is he's joining Tyrese Halliburton, who for the majority of last year led the league in assists, right? So Cam Whitmore is going to be put in the right spots a lot of the time, and he's going to be able to develop his games off the catch, right? So Cam Whitmore, great pickup here for Indiana. Maybe he can develop into a great scorer, that their next star, right? But if you look at their lineup here, you can have a potential lineup next year of Tyrese Halliburton, Ben Mathurin, Cam Whitmore, Jalen Smith, and Miles Turner, which would be offensively and defensively great on both sides of the ball. Maybe you see a little decline from Ben Mathurin if he takes a starting spot. But, sophomore slumps always happen in the NBA. But moving over to number 8, this is one of the picks that pretty much everybody has. Wherever you look, if you hear it from a random or if you hear it from an expert, Anthony Black seems to be going to the Washington Wizards. It just makes sense, right? But this is a guy in Anthony Black who he wasn't Arkansas's number 1 choice as far as recruits going into last year. But he turned out to be probably the best one after last season. A 6'7" guard who's very smart on the court, very high IQ. If he went to the Washington Wizards, he would provide them much needed defense. A guy that he was the first Division I freshman with 70-plus steals and 20-plus blocks since Zion Williamson, which was in 2019. We are going to need to see his outside shot develop, but that's a lot of these younger guys, man. A lot of these younger talents coming out of college, they're super raw, they're super athletic. They just need a little bit more touch in their game, especially from the outside. But in a perfect world, right? That wouldn't necessarily be needed in his first year or two there in Washington, as this team is full of offensive weapons. They're full of offensive scores. And in a dream scenario, right, this is a Wizards team that has Bradley Beal. They can bring back Kyle Kuzma and Kristaps Porzingis. They still have Daniel Gafford, right? So you can run a lineup of Anthony Black, which is the point guard that this team has been missing since Russell Westbrook, Bradley Beal, Kyle Kuzma, Kristaps Porzingis, and Daniel Gafford. That sets up a team with great scores, 2 or 3 great defenders. This team could be a definite play-in team, maybe a sneaky 6 seed, right? But I wouldn't go that far, as Anthony Black is going to be a game changer. But with all the animosity, with all the stuff that's going on in Washington right now, I mean, from what we know, Bradley Beal might be traded in 20 minutes, right? Which I hope so, because I'm actually recording. But moving over to number 9, this is the guy who didn't make he didn't make my list here in the first mock draft, but Jalen Hood-Schifino, right? A guy who is a 6'4" combo guard. And when I watch him, I dove deeper into his game. He really controls the game, right? And he dominates them, right? This is a guy who's a good enough athlete. He's an okay shooter, but again, we're going to need all these younger guys to develop their outside shot. I believe Jalen Hood-Schifino going into Utah, going into a lead role in a team that wants to compete right now with veteran talent around him, I believe he could turn into something special. He's one of my favorite guys to watch so far, to be completely honest, and he's rising up the boards to me. But if you surround him with Jordan Clarkson, Lauri Markkanen, Kelly Olynyk, Walker Kessler, this is a guy that can slash, and he can pretty much play his own game. It's a guy he's in a similar situation with Scoot Henderson, where he's walking into a situation where the team, the culture is already set. Just go in there and be yourself. And I think Jalen Hood-Schifino can do that there in Utah, as there's nothing really else to do besides play basketball. Right? But moving over to number 10, as I get it, it's been a little bit boring. I promised some drama here early on. But here we go. The Dallas Mavericks are trading the number 10 overall pick to the Phoenix Suns in exchange for DeAndre Ayton. They're also moving Tim Hardaway Jr. and JaVale McGee to the Suns, and again, they received DeAndre Ayton. The Mavericks go all in with this move, right? They would have a core of Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, Josh Green, and DeAndre Ayton. If they bring back Kyrie in free agency, sure, they would have to fill out some other spots on this roster, but it's a move that may not make Luka uber excited, right? Or overly committed to the team all of a sudden. But it would show that, I think it would show Luka that this team is willing to do whatever it takes. And look, if the fit doesn't work, DeAndre Ayton's contract is big, but it's not impossible to move. And you didn't give up much to get him, right? So you're taking, it's a low risk, high reward type of situation. And if it doesn't work out, you can just trade him, right? So the Mavericks, it makes a ton of sense to me. For the Suns, you might be getting less value than you should for DeAndre Ayton. But at the same time, DeAndre Ayton wants to get out of there. He's bad for the culture. And you can go out there and get a guy like Taylor Hendricks, a guy who is one of my favorite players to watch in this draft class so far. But the Suns cash out, and they get one of the guys that I believe has one of the highest floors in this class, one of the safest picks. This is a guy in Taylor Hendricks who is 3-and-D, right? He should get it tatted on his body. He averages two blocks a game or so, while shooting 40% from 3 at 6'9" at the forward/center position. In today's game, this is a guy who can slide right into the 5 for Phoenix, right? Who's also going to move off of DeAndre Ayton. So Phoenix with this move is bringing in a 6'9" guy that does everything they need. They can move off DeAndre Ayton, which is $30+ million, and they can bring in, other talent to bring off of the bench or to fill in into the starting lineup. They can bring back Chris Paul. They can bring back other guys, and Phoenix could be right back there next season. But whenever you can bring in this level of defensive versatility with Taylor Hendricks, with the outside shot ability at the center position, you do that, right? And not to mention, this team also has Frank Vogel as a head coach, right? So Taylor Hendricks, I think, can only take strides defensively, hopefully offensively as well. I mean, it's going to be hard not to when you're surrounded by guys like Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant, right? So Taylor Hendricks, I think it's a beautiful spot for him. I think it's a win-win for everybody. Dallas gets their guy. Phoenix gets a guy to replace DeAndre Ayton, a guy who fits them more so than DeAndre Ayton. And Taylor Hendricks goes to a great spot where he can compete from day one. I think it just makes sense for all sides, but let me know again what you think down below. Moving over to number 11. I have the Magic taking Grady Dick. The Magic, look, they have playmakers. They have defenders. And, they have a little bit of shot creation as well, to be fair. But they're missing a guy who, to me, can create his own shot. They're missing a guy who's an elite knockdown shooter. And I believe that's exactly what they get here in Grady Dick. This is a guy who made 83 three-pointers last year for Kansas, which is a record for any freshman in school history. And this is a guy that no doubt is the best shooter in the class. He makes a ton of tough shots, and I think that is key for a team like Orlando that is still trying to figure everything out. But however, Grady Dick, he is on the skinnier side, and he might be a defensive liability at the end of the day. But I believe they can hide it there in Orlando with plenty defensive options that they do have. On the screen here, you see I do have him coming off of the bench, right, with Markelle Fultz if they bring him back, with Cole Anthony, with John Isaac if they keep him, and Mo Wagner. So this is a guy that can come off the bench, give you 15, 20 minutes a night, kind of be, best case scenario, maybe like a Tyler Hero, give you 20 a night off the bench. But we'll have to see. I think Grady Dick, though, falling to 11, great value there for Orlando as they come out this draft with maybe their next starting backcourt. No shade to Jalen Suggs, but Ausar Thompson and Grady Dick, I think it's a great draft here for Orlando as they have Franz Wagner, they have Wendell Carter, Paolo Banchero. This team's in a good situation, right? But moving over to number 12, I'm taking basically Jrue Holiday here for the OKC Thunder. If you are unaware of Cason Wallace, he's a guard out of Kentucky. And like I said, he's a baby Jrue Holiday. A 6'4" guard with great defensive hands and anticipation. And more so than Jrue Holiday, this guy at a young age provides a better outside shot. He shot 43% on catch and shoot threes last year. That is a perfect fit. I get it's college ball, but this is a guy that could be effective with or without the ball. And in this case, if he goes to the Thunder, he can play in lineups with Shea and take those tough guard assignments, right, on the defensive side of the ball. But can you imagine, going to the Thunder where he can run like the quote-unquote one, right, but he's going to guard the other team's best player. And you're going to have Lou Dort and Cason Wallace on the perimeter, surrounding Shea, right? Which Shea is an okay defender, but that is definitely the flaw in his game. If you surround him with Cason Wallace and Lou Dort, right, you can also throw Josh Giddey in that lineup. It sounds tiring to go against, right? That's a young team that is hungry, and they're going to get after it. Cason Wallace is going to embody that here in OKC. But I think right now OKC, with all the young talent and picks that they still have, they need more so fit than talent. And I think they get a huge fit here in Cason Wallace, who can play off the bench. He can play in the starting lineup, whatever they need from him day one. Moving over to pick 13, the Blazers. Let's remember that they traded for OG Anunoby and Chris Boucher earlier on in this draft. And they're going to go out there and get Derek Lively. This was a pick to me that could have been a couple options. You could have had Keontae George. You could have had Jordan Hawkins, right, out of UConn. Or you could have had Derek Lively. I could see either of those routes, either of those directions. But I think they're going to go with a modern-day five, right? A guy who provides defensive versatility, rim protection, and a little bit of offense as he can be a lob threat at times. But Derek Lively, he had a really great latter half of the season as he was one of the highly rated high school prospects just a few years ago, and he showed that in the second half of last season. It's not the best pick here, right? I'm going to say that Derek Lively is not the best pick here, but it's a win-now move for Portland, even though I want to see Damian Lillard traded, right? But I'm going to follow what Portland and their wishes are, and that is to win now, right? So they go out and trade for OG Anunoby, they trade for Chris Boucher, and then they get Derek Lively, right? 3 great defenders, and who knows? Maybe if this Portland team does decide they want to move Jusuf Nurkic, right, to free up even more money, Derek Lively could be a day one starter. You could still have some extra money for the bench to bring in some extra scores. And I mean, you see here on the bench, you have a guy like Cam Reddish that's hitting free agency. You have other guys like Nas Little, Matisse Thybulle, who's hitting free agency, as well as Trendon Watford. So you have a lot of younger talent on this bench. But I mean, let's say they trade Jusuf Nurkic. You have the money to go out there and get another scorer off the bench if that is not Cam Reddish in your mind. So Portland, I think it's a win now move. And Chauncey Billups and this Portland team, they're going to be in a pretty good position going into next season. And to close off the list, at number 14, the Pelicans keep their pick. I was contemplating having maybe the Grizzlies trade up or something crazy like that. But Nick Smith Jr. is going to be the pick. To me, if you go back a year ago, this is a guy that was rated number 1 in the class over Victor Wembanyama, over Scoot Henderson, over Brandon Miller. This Nick Smith has a lot of untapped potential, right? And I think New Orleans gets a steal here at number 14. Nick Smith, we will say he only played 17 games last year as a true freshman. But that does not, that was due to a lot of knee flare-ups and a lot of knee injuries throughout the year. So a lot of stuff that he tried to play through, and he didn't give his body full time to recover. And that's just, being young and dumb, right? But Nick Smith, he's still a great combo scoring guard who loves to get downhill. And the Pelicans are built for now, right? They're built for now and the future, to be fair. But they now have 3 point guards on the roster if they bring in Nick Smith. I don't see why Nick Smith can't be the best guard out of those 3 in a year or two, right? When you have Jose Alvarado, when you have Kyra Lewis, and now Nick Smith, I don't see why Nick Smith can't be the best one out of those 3, even by the midseason mark. But I will say, even if they want to roll with Jose Alvarado for some more defensive ability there in the starting lineup, Nick Smith can be that 6th man off the bench and run with guys like Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Larry Nance, and Jackson Hayes like you see on your screen, and they can still be a very fun team that can run off the bench. You would have to answer some questions about Kyra Lewis, though, going forward, but that's going to do it for our lottery mock, as we're only 27 minutes in or so, but now I want to transition to the news, as this is the first time I've started with the actual topic of the episode and then transition to the news. But regardless, let's talk about Bradley Beal, right? We had Anthony Black going there earlier in the mock draft, and that is only because Bradley Beal, as of right now, is a Washington Wizard, right? And that's what I had to go off of. But the Washington Wizards and Bradley Beal, per sources, they are going to work together to find a suitable trade that should the franchise go towards a rebuilding route. It is worth note that the Wizards, they do have a new front office, and we know that front offices, when they come into a new place, they love to leave their mark. In recent memory, Minnesota, the Minnesota Timberwolves, they got a new front office last year. What do? They go and trade 6 first-round picks for Rudy Gobert and mess up their future entirely, right? But these new GMs, they love to come in, make their mark, and say, this team is built because of me, right? And that was all that was. It was just a move of greed for Minnesota last year. And I think a new regiment here in Washington could maybe do the same. Hopefully not to the same extent, right? But Bradley Beal, he does have a no-trade clause, right? Part of his 5-year, $250 million extension that he signed last offseason. But right now, his trade value is believed to be far lower than expected because he's making $50 million a year, because he has declined a little bit in his play, and because he does have a no-trade clause, right? Wherever he gets traded to, that team has to take on and honor that no-trade clause going forward. So it's going to be very interesting to see. I think it's like an 80-20 that he's back with the Wizards next year, maybe even like a 90-10, right? And there's also reports that the Celtics, we know that Bradley Beal and Jason Tatum, they grew up together in St. Louis. They have made it all but known that they want to play together at some point in their careers, and they're not pursuing Bradley Beal. They've already come out and said that they're more interested in giving Jaylen Brown an extension than trading for a guy making $50 million. They'd rather just pay Jaylen Brown that money and keep everything in-house, which makes a lot more sense. I'm happy the Celtics aren't overthinking things right here in 2023. But moving to just other news around the league, I mean, Scoot Henderson, he had a very impressive Hornets workout per reports. But Brandon Miller, he's still more likely to go at the number 2 spot, which you saw today in here in our mock draft. But I will say Dame, there's been reports he was also very impressed with Scoot in his workout with Portland. Is there a chance that Dame would welcome Scoot to come in instead of making a trade like for OG Anunoby and some win now type of players? That's something that's very interesting, right? But Zion Williamson, his trade value is not sky high right now. Reports say that the Pelicans would rather trade Zion before trading Brandon Ingram. I mean, this is a guy that's only played 20% of his games or so in his career so far. So I understand the logic. I understand the reasoning. It's crazy to believe a player like Zion that was so coveted, and he was that unicorn I was talking about earlier coming out of the draft, that, right now it's like he's expendable. I don't want to diminish the talent of Zion. He's a 2-time All-Star starter. This is a guy that when he's on the court, he was one of the most dominant forces that this game has really ever seen, right? To be completely honest, he just has to stay healthy, and he hasn't been able to do that here in his first couple years in the league. But it'll be very interesting. I would hope that if Cleveland is watching, make an offer for Zion Williamson, right? I mean, I think what New Orleans is missing right now, they're missing Isaac Okoro, a lockdown a defender. They're missing Jared Allen, and they're missing a couple second-round picks as well. I think that trade should be able to get Zion in Cleveland, but we'll have to see, right? Obviously, very biased. But Damian Lillard and the Blazers, they've shown no interest in parting ways. I've talked about that a couple times here. I mean, we've known this. If it's going to happen, Damian Lillard's going to have to go to the front office. He's going to have to say, hey, I want out of Portland. And it's just that simple, right? But until that happens, there's no point in mocking up trades for Damian Lillard to go place A or B, because it's not going to happen unless Damian Lillard wants it to happen, right? The 76ers, they want to re-sign James Harden, but they are not desperate to do so. James Harden to the Rockets viewed as increasingly uncertain as the Houston Rockets. I talked about it earlier with Amen Thompson. The team is revisiting the idea with their options at the number 4 pick. The Warriors, the Golden State Warriors, they're looking to trade up in the draft by offering Jonathan Kuminga. We know Jonathan Kuminga, he has plenty of burner accounts, and all season, instead of focusing on getting better, seeing how he could contribute to a winning team, he took to Twitter to complain about Steve Kerr and the rotations, as he's more so hero ball. He's more about himself than winning basketball games. But the last bit of news here that I do have on today's show is that the Dallas Mavericks, they are interested in acquiring Bojan Bogdanovic from the Detroit Pistons. Something that I could see happening. Let's say they make that trade for DeAndre Ayton, right? They can go out there and probably trade some other pieces that I have on the team, the very few, right? Maybe they trade Maxi Kleber in 2 seconds to the Pistons, and they can bring in Bojan Bogdanovic, and he can really complete that starting lineup, but I don't see it happening. I could see it more so likely they get a guy like Jay Crowder here in the offseason to fill that starting lineup, more so than a guy like Bojan, as the Pistons, there's not a real reason to trade him, at least not to Dallas, to be completely honest. But to close the show is, man, I just peeped over at the time, and we must have not breathed this entire show. I'm looking over, and we're only 32 minutes in or so, right? 32 minutes, and we're now on the last thing of the show. So that's what happens when Bakari isn't here. I mean, we get straight to it. We don't mess around, and we don't rant on the Cavs and Houston Rockets, which I don't know if he's even listening to this point, but maybe that's a good thing. But Bruce Brown here as the TAP Player of the Week. I asked Bakari last night. He sent in the answer, and it was Bruce Brown. And I'm going to break it down like this. Good role players, they are essential on championship teams. And in the last 2 games of the NBA Finals, the most important games of the year, there was no better role player than Bruce Brown. He had 21 points, shooting 73% from the field on the road in Miami in Game 4, while also giving you great defense. And they go up 3-1 because it's hard to beat that production from Bruce Brown. In Game 5, his statistical numbers weren't there like they were in Game 4, but his impact may have been greater, right? Mostly in the fourth quarter. This is a guy who had a clutch putback late in the fourth quarter that put Denver up 1 with, I believe, a minute and a half to go in the game, right? So, boom, he puts him up 1, which was one of their last baskets in the game. Late in the game, after Jimmy shot that fadeaway, he got a big rebound, and he made a pair of free throws to close the game after Miami's last couple possessions. This is a guy that was signed for 2 years, $13 million this past offseason for Denver, right? Denver got a steal. There's no doubt about it. There's no two ways about it. This is a guy that went from blowing the Brooklyn Nets season 2 years ago, shooting that crazy game winner in Game 1. I think it was last year against Boston. Maybe it was 2 years ago. But now he's an NBA champion, playing one of the most pivotal roles on a team that won their first title in franchise history. So shout out to Bruce Brown. But just to close it out here, this is the last thing I want to note before we get out of here. The NBA playoffs are officially behind us, and I'm just going to throw this out there. You know, my co-host and I, every single round we did a preview and predictions, just like any other podcast or any other YouTube channel. And out of the 15 total playoff series, the loser between the two of us was Bakari. Bakari ended at 9-6. He was 60% of the time he was right, so I mean, credit to him. But I was 10-5, one more series better than him, as I got 67% of the series right. I'll take that mark, right? I believe I missed on the Cavs, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, the Warriors in the semifinals, and of course the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. Those conference finals killed me when it came to the predictions. But regardless, I was 10-5. He's 9-6. It's something that we'll have to remember going into next year, right, if we're still at it. But without further ado, that's going to do it for today's show. I mean, we got through our mock draft here in 32 minutes or so. We covered some news here around the NBA, and then we got into our 12th Tap Player of the Week. So we did pretty much everything here on today's episode, and hopefully you guys enjoyed. You know, we're on the road to 500 big ones, 500 big subscribers here on the channel. That's the next big milestone, as we just eclipsed 300. So, you know, if you enjoy what you're listening to, you know, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff, as we're on the road to our next big milestone, and we can't get there without you guys. But without further ado, I mean, tomorrow we're going to have some fantasy football content coming for you guys, as every single week. If you guys don't know, I know a couple people haven't been hearing this late in the podcast, but every single Wednesday and Friday, I released fantasy football content for you guys. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it's our podcast. On Wednesdays and Fridays, it's just short little videos to give you some fantasy football insight for this upcoming year. So if that interests you at all, go ahead and support us down below. You know, subscribe to the channel and tell a friend to tell a friend, because we are growing. And again, we couldn't be more grateful here for you guys. It's crazy that we are approaching this 500 mark, because eight or so months ago, I was in my dorm and I just had a quick little pipe dream, and I wanted to start this podcast. And all I had was my gaming headset and a computer, right? And I just wanted to get started, and we had no visuals at the time. It was one picture, and that was it, right? It was just hit record and we're going. And now we're at episode 70. You know, the support's been crazy. We've had hundreds of thousands, or not, but, you know, probably about 100,000 total views, maybe more than that. Later, tons of likes, 311 of you guys later. And we're here, you know, and we're on the road to the next big milestone. Can't thank you guys enough. I've said that a couple times already. But until tomorrow with some more fantasy football content, stay happy, stay healthy. We're out. And have a good weekend if you don't watch tomorrow.